Jonathan Blow released Braid all the way back in 2008, and it, along with a handful of other indie titles, helped spark an indie gaming revolution. Jonathan Blow became somewhat of a gaming superstar from the success of the game, having been featured in interviews on several sites, as well as in the film Indie Game the Movie, and many eagerly awaited what he would follow up the success of Braid with. Cut to nearly 10 years later, where in 2016 Jonathan and his newly formed team at Thekla Inc. released The Witness. A massive departure from the time manipulation and pixel-perfect platforming of what came before it, The Witness is more akin to an open-ended exploration puzzle game like Myst, one of the game's primary inspirations. Players traverse an island composed of various biomes, each with several screens scattered about with seemingly simple slide puzzles to solve, all with the goal of completing sections to activate a shrine located within the base of the island's mountain. With very few exceptions, the puzzles in The Witness largely revolve around connecting one point to another on said screen. Simply start with a large circle in the screen, and from there move to one of the exits indicated on said screen. The challenge comes in through a variety of means, including needing to reference reflections to guide the line through an otherwise invisible path, separating different colored dots with your line, and making parallel lines simultaneously. Each section of the island has its own challenges and changes to the established rule of how the puzzles work, and it all leads up to a gauntlet of puzzles deep within the heart of the mountain. But for those puzzle seekers out there looking for a bit of an extra challenge, there is the appropriately named Challenge Trophy, and that's what we're here to discuss today. Once players have completed all 11 of the island's laser challenges, they are able to return to the mountain and climb through any previously unlocked walkways. But instead of heading into the depths of the mountain itself right away, players should take a moment to observe the statues carrying a large yellow box. Completing the puzzles on said box will allow the player to descend a bit deeper into the mountain than before. During your initial climb through the mountain, closer to the end, players will have come across a statue of a man sitting and pondering over a puzzle panel. But when they first come to this man, the panel is shut off. Returning after completing the yellow box at the top brings this panel to life, and creating the puzzle it presents opens up a previously hidden path. Beyond this hidden door are several extra puzzles to solve, but more importantly 2 additional doors with quick and relatively easy puzzles to solve. Once all of these puzzles are done, this path opens up into the challenge, a grueling test of the player's knowledge of the game's mechanics and the various changes that are made to said puzzles. The player walks through a series of rooms, each one with scattered about inactive puzzle panels, until they come to a turntable with a record player and a simple puzzle to complete. Doing so lets the record begin to play in the Hall of the Mountain King, and players have until the conclusion of the song to complete the challenge. But now here's the thing about The Witness. Every puzzle on the island's surface and into the mountain has only one solution. As such, if a player gets stumped on a particularly troublesome puzzle or just wants to skip a section because they don't like that area's specific gimmick or because they've already done it in like a previous playthrough or something, all they need to do is look up a walkthrough on YouTube or IGN or something and move on from there. That works all well and good for the island's various puzzles, except for the ones within the challenge. Each time players activate the record player at the beginning of the challenge, they will have a series of puzzles to solve, same as any part of the island. But unlike those puzzles, each of the puzzles found in the challenge are randomly generated each time. So there's no guides to follow, and there's a ticking clock to keep you consistently stressed. The type of puzzle remains consistent for each area, but other than that, things are completely randomized each run, and it could be incredibly frustrating to try and complete this. It's been the bane of many a would-be platinum hunter, myself included. But today, I'm hoping I can help fix that for you. So welcome to another episode of Trophy Tips, the show where I do my part and offer you some tips on how I did the thing so that you can hopefully earn this trophy and the eventual platinum for yourself. But before I get into my usual 4 tips formula for these videos, I want to briefly go over each section of the challenge and offer individual tips for each one. Trust me, you're going to need a lot of help with this one. The challenge is broken up into various sections, each one with specific puzzles that need to be solved before you can advance to the next one. The first area is probably the easiest, offering only 3 quick puzzles that have the smallest grids to traverse in the whole area. As soon as you start the turntable, you'll have a few seconds before the song officially kicks on, so make your way to these panels immediately and solve them as quickly as you can. The second puzzle sits on its own in between the first chamber and the large cavern. The grid has only one solution for its path, and you'll have to trace your line over 2 hexagons along the way, and this will eventually reveal a path that we use later on in the challenge. Make sure to orient yourself in a way that it's easy to understand what directions to turn when you need it, and more importantly, take a photo of the puzzle before and after you complete it. Doing so not only gives you the eventual solution to the path you'll need to walk, but also the location of 2 additional puzzles you'll need to solve in this area in order to progress. If you don't think you can get the photo yourself and still have time to complete the rest, see if a friend can help you out, possibly someone who also needs this trophy, who you can then help take photos for when it's their turn to give it a try. The third area has 4 puzzles spread apart in a strange cavern formation, and each time you play through the challenge, they appear on different screens in a different order. Thankfully, the 4 puzzle types are the same: Tetris, Suns, Maze, and Symmetry. Assuming you have an understanding of how each of these puzzles work, they should be easy enough to solve. The key here is to go into the room and check each screen as you do. It's impossible to see all 4 at once in a single shot, so I recommend checking in the order shown on screen to see where the first puzzle appears. After that, simply look around for the next one and so forth until you've completed all 4 and can move on to the next section. This next section has 3 panels light up, each one with puzzles that require a line to separate black and white squares. The problem is that 2 of these puzzles are literally impossible to complete, so figuring out which one to complete can be stressful. And once you complete that puzzle, another set of 3 screens opens up behind them with the same type of puzzle, only now you're separating 3 colors. This area admittedly requires a little bit of luck in the grouping of the squares, but look for ones where they are blocked in as few groups as possible. The more clumped together the shapes are without having any of them being separated by a corner from one another, the more likely that's the correct puzzle to solve. Once that's done, you'll need to reference the photos we took earlier in the second section. This will reveal your path you can walk and where the puzzles you need to solve are located. You can try to brute force this walking portion of this puzzle, as walls will come up to block your path, but knowing ahead of time where to go thanks to the photos taken earlier will mean you're not wasting time that can be spent solving the puzzles. The puzzles in this area themselves require you to trace a line next to a series of triangles, the triangles indicating how many sides of that box your line can touch. If there's 3 in the box, you'll move your line next to that space 3 times. If there's 2, you'll move it next to it twice. And if there's only 1, you'll move that next to it once. Don't worry about any blank boxes, those don't matter for this. Anytime you have a box with 3 triangles in it, you'll always make your line go around it as if you were doing a U-turn. It is impossible to use this space any other way, so keep that in mind. As for the space that has 2, the lines can touch at a corner or a parallel to it, so plan your route accordingly. And in our last room, we have the 2 pillars. 2 puzzles that are wrapped around a pair of pillars on either side of where you exit the maze, and completing these will open a small room inside the chamber and the trophy will pop for you. The pillars have 2 different kinds of puzzle, one where you must cross all the dots, and one where you are separating black and white squares. These function the same as any other such puzzle but are on a curved surface, and you'll have to draw with 2 lines moving in symmetry. The best advice I can give here is draw your line as carefully as possible and just try to do your best. This is the last set of puzzles you have to complete. They're usually easier than it seems at first, and if you're anything like me, you'll stumble into the solution by moving carefully and eventually walking away with that platinum trophy. So basically that's the challenge. And while those tips are good for each individual area, I also have 4 general tips to help you hopefully complete this task. Starting with number 1, we have tip number 1. Practice makes perfect. The challenge is meant as a test of the player's knowledge of the puzzles they were completing on the island above, with the randomized nature of each puzzle meaning you can't simply look up a guide. Knowing what kinds of puzzles you'll be doing throughout the challenge is important, and even more so, practicing said puzzles up on the island above can help you feel more confident in completing them. Within the challenge, you'll be doing a variety of different puzzles, each of which can be done at different parts of the island above. So if you're struggling with a particular type of puzzle or skipped over that specific section by using a guide before coming down here, head back to the area that has that puzzle type and get some practice in. Any screens that have already been completed can be done again, so go through and practice a bit if you feel you need it. That said, the large cavern you enter just before the challenge's main entrance has every one of these puzzles that you can also fiddle with. So if you don't want to go around the beautifully sculpted island, you can also just hang in this dingy dark cave like you're trying to be Batman or something. Now that you've practiced your way through any blind spots you may have, the next tip is tip number 2, silence is bliss. As mentioned before, when you're playing through the challenge, you'll be serenaded by In the Hall of the Mountain King, one of those infamous pieces of classical orchestral music that still somehow gets copyright flagged on YouTube. It's a piece that begins fairly calm and works well as background music, but it slowly begins to swell up and become a nerve-wracking piece to listen to. This tip is fairly simple. Turn off the music or altogether just mute your screen. As I said, In the Hall of the Mountain King turns into an intentionally nerve-wracking song closer to its climax, and once you're past a certain point with the puzzles, it can only heighten your sense of urgency that much more. By turning off the music or listening to something else like a podcast or your own music, it nullifies the music's effect that it has on you. Yes, the music acts as a timer to indicate how much time you have to complete the challenge, but muting the song just means you're not distracted by it. The intentionally nerve-wracking sense of dread it exhibits can't affect you, and the worst thing that can happen is you're in the middle of trying to complete a puzzle and it'll just shut off on you because the timer ran out. To that end, tip number 3, slow and steady. The version of In the Hall of the Mountain King that plays for this challenge, whether you're listening to it or not, has a runtime of about 6 minutes and 20 seconds. That means from the time the first puzzle illuminates alongside the first note of the song, you have about that much time to complete the 14 puzzles set before you. Thankfully, some areas are easier than others, such as the very beginning 3 puzzles, but taking your time and pausing for a moment to think about each solution will only benefit you. With 14 puzzles in total, that means you can safely spend about 25 seconds on each puzzle, leaving you with a buffer of about 30 seconds to work with beyond that for moving and trying to solve each puzzle. At most, it can take about 5 seconds to get from the beginning circle to the exit of most puzzles, giving you about 15 to 20 seconds to figure out the optimal path you need to take within it. Now, a half a minute doesn't sound like a whole lot of time, but keep in mind that some puzzles won't take nearly as long to complete. The opening 3 puzzles, for instance, are usually very easy to solve, and getting through those quickly will only add more time for you to complete the ones that follow. Time crunches are never fun, but optimizing your time will only help maximize your potential chances of completing this challenge. But sometimes things can go a bit haywire. You fail one puzzle and have to backtrack to the previous one to resolve it, that sort of thing. So that leads me into my final tip for this video. Tip number 4, quitters sometimes prosper. The challenge is intended to be the hardest part of the game. It can be stressful, it can be nerve-wracking, and it's above all else a genuine challenge to complete. So on top of taking things slow, the 2 big roadblocks that I found are the cave area where the 4 puzzles are spread out, and the area immediately after where you have only 1 solvable puzzle out of 3 options twice. These 2 sections have different problems that can make them hard to get through quickly, and it doesn't help that they're the middle 2 puzzles, so here is my big final tip for you. Do not be afraid to quit early. Taking your time and knowing when you've started to fall behind can cause you to panic, making more mistakes in the process. So if you ever think that you're too far gone, I say the easiest thing to do is take a step back, head back to the start of the puzzle, and either redo the single line puzzle on the record player to restart the whole challenge again, or just give yourself a small break. If you're listening to the music playing while performing this, I found that the best time to call it is when you get to the part where the song goes dun 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 dun, because that is the most nerve-wracking part of the song at all, and if you're not in the final room of the challenge yet, it's good to just call it like you see it. If you're not listening to the music, then just use your best judgment to determine if you have a chance of success or not. The challenge is an appropriately named struggle for even the most avid of puzzle players, but hopefully the many tips I've offered here can give you a better shot at completing this one. I know that once I shut off the music, took my time, and quit when I knew I wasn't going anywhere, I was able to complete this one. And I was genuinely surprised by how quickly that happened. I must have tried this no less than 50 times over the course of 3 separate several-hour play sessions. But then when I stopped, reevaluated the challenge a bit, and came up with these tips, I managed to do it in as few as 5 additional tries. Anyway, that's about going to do it for this episode of Trophy Tips. Are there any trophies that you're struggling with that I might be able to help offer tips on? You can check out my profile on PlayStationProfiles.com to see if I've earned the trophy yet. And if so, leave a comment down below or hit me up on Twitter, and I'll do my best to help you out. So thank you for watching, follow me on all the fun socials, and I will see all of you in the next video. Take care.